Hello, and welcome to PSY200 Social Psychology. In this section, we're going to talk about the real, imagined, or implied presence of others, social influence, conformity, a little bit about the Asch Study, and some about compliance techniques, and obedience. In this section, you should learn some general information on social psychology, how the real, imagined, or implied presence of others impacts us, and then how conformity, compliance, and obedience connect to the study of social psychology. So, what is social psychology? This is the scientific study of how a person's thoughts, feelings, and behavior are affected by the real, imagined, or implied presence of others. So, what does that mean? The real presence of others is fairly straightforward. It means that our thoughts, feelings, and behavior can be affected by people who are physically present or around us at a given moment. For example, a social psychologist might wonder how a basketball player's ability to shoot free throws is affected by the opposing team's fans booing and waving their arms. The imagined presence of others deals with how our thoughts, feelings, and behavior can be affected by thinking about or imagining how others will react to us. Pretend that you're debating about whether to attend a party this evening or to instead stay home and study. You might imagine how your friends, your family, and your instructors would react to your decision. Picturing your family and instructors being proud of your hard work and dedication as a student might lead you to choose to stay home. Thinking about your friends having fun at the party without you might make you more likely to attend. This example shows how even when people are not physically present, they can still influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. The implied presence of others is when there might or might not be someone there, but we understand there could be. So an example of this would be security cameras in a public area, like a shopping center or a busy intersection. Many stores and now many cities have security cameras monitoring public areas to deter unwanted behavior. Even though most of us understand there might not be someone watching the camera constantly, we are aware of the possibility that there could be. These cameras also serve as a reminder that we should obey laws and social convention, even if no one is around or watching us. Real presence refers to the actual physical presence of others in a social situation. This includes interactions with friends, family, colleagues, or strangers in a shared environment. The effects of real presence can significantly influence behavior, attitudes, and emotions. For example, individuals may feel more motivated to perform tasks in front of an audience, social facilitation, or may experience heightened anxiety when being evaluated by others. Real presence is crucial in social psychology as it can directly affect group dynamics and individual performance. Imagined presence occurs when individuals envision or mentally simulate the presence of others, even when they are not physically there. This can involve thinking about how others might react to one's behavior or decisions, leading to feelings of self-consciousness or social anxiety. For instance, a student may feel pressure to perform well on an exam because they imagine their peers' judgment. This form of presence can impact decision-making and behavior by making individuals more aware of social norms and expectations, even in their absence. Implied presence refers to the suggestion or influence of others without their direct presence or even their knowledge. This can occur through social norms, cultural expectations, or the influence of authority figures. For example, the awareness of social norms, like laws or ethical guidelines, can shape behavior even when no one is around to enforce them. Implied presence is often linked to concepts such as the bystander effect, where individuals may feel less inclined to help in emergencies due to the perceived presence of others who are also not acting. Understanding these three forms of presence is essential in social psychology. They highlight the ways that the social environment influences individual behavior. Each type of presence plays a role in shaping how we interact with others and the decisions we make in social contexts. Let's move on to social influence, attributions, stereotypes, prejudice, and discrimination. How do we define social influence? Social influence involves how we are affected by pressure from others. This pressure can be as direct as an order from a police officer or seemingly indirect as the urge we feel to go along with the crowd. In this lecture, we will cover 3 types of social influence: conformity, compliance, and obedience. So how do we define conformity? This occurs when a person changes their behavior to match the behavior of others and thus goes along with the crowd. You have likely seen many examples of conformity in your everyday life. For instance, consider fads and trends in fashion. If you think back to your own high school days, you might remember some classmates dressing somewhat alike or having similar hairstyles. This shows an example of conformity. Here is a video that we won't watch here, but I will link it below, and it's a man dancing on a hill where no one else is dancing. And at first, he's the guy dancing on the hill and nobody is joining in. But by the end of the video, everybody is over there with him. He was able to get people to conform to his unusual activity instead of sticking to the rest of the crowd at the beginning of the video when everyone's kind of sitting and he goes against the norm. This video will also be linked below, and it's an example of this person who lost a bet to their brother. And they're required to dance on a street corner to random music, and they do so, and in doing that, people end up joining him. It's kind of interesting because someone had to go do the thing, but then other people kind of conformed to his activity and decided to join in because he was doing it. A research-based example of conformity comes from the Asch Study. In this study, participants were asked to judge which of 3 lines was the same length as a standard or target line. This task was meant to be simple, so it was obvious to the participants what the correct answer was. However, there was a trick to this study that participants were not aware of. The participant was actually completing the study along with a group of Confederates. Remember, in research, a Confederate is someone who works for the research team but pretends not to. Here, the Confederates were trained to act like fellow research participants. In each group, there was an actual participant along with 6 Confederates. 5 of the 6 Confederates gave their answer to the line length question before the participant himself answered. The Confederates were trained by the researchers to give an obviously wrong answer. The researchers wondered whether the participant would go against the crowd and give what he knew to be the correct answer, or if he would follow the crowd and give an obviously incorrect answer. Remember, to the participant, the Confederates were fellow participants, just like him. So, what do you think they found? How would you have behaved if you were a participant in the study? Or would you go against the crowd? Would you have gone with the crowd? What do you think? Here's a video showing some examples from this study, and it will be linked below. So, participants conformed with the group of Confederates and gave an obviously wrong answer. In fact, participants conformed on approximately 1/3 of the trials. So it definitely wasn't all of the participants, but 1/3 is a huge group to give an obviously wrong answer. Follow-up studies have revealed that people feel most pressured to conform when the rest of the group seems to be in agreement. So if they're the only person, they are more likely to conform if they're the only one with an opposite opinion. So long as there's at least one other dissenter who goes against the group, participants felt much more free to express their own beliefs and go along with that one person and give the correct answer. So why do people feel pressured to conform? What do we think about this? So why do people feel pressured to conform? Well, normative influence and informative influence. Normative influence is going along with the crowd to gain liking and acceptance. In the Asch study, participants may have wanted to promote harmony within the group and gain the group's approval, so they copied the group's answer even when they knew it was wrong. Informative influence is going along with the crowd because you think that they know something that you don't. This example would be traveling to an unfamiliar city and you want to use their public transportation. You might first watch what others are doing. Do they buy a ticket at a machine? Do they pay when boarding? Do they swipe a card? Do they show something on their phone screen? In this situation, you could follow the crowd, assuming they probably know the public transportation system better than you do. What about compliance? How do we define compliance? This is another form of social influence, and it occurs when a person changes their behavior because of a request from another person or group. Typically, the person or group making the request does not have any real power or authority to demand the change in behavior. If a car salesperson convinces you to buy a vehicle from them, this would be an example of compliance. The salesperson has no legitimate power over you, and yet you went along with the request. If a friend asks to borrow $5 to buy lunch and you lend them the money, this also shows compliance. Marketing firms and businesses have been particularly interested in research on compliance techniques because using these techniques increases the likelihood that a potential customer will go along with the request that's being made of them. There are many different compliance techniques, but we're going to cover the foot in the door, lowball, door in the face, that's not all, and techniques based on scarcity. With the foot in the door technique, imagine you want to borrow $40 from your friend to put gas in your car. How could you get that person to lend you $40? You might first ask them if you can borrow $10, and when their wallet's open, ask them if you can borrow $40 instead. This is an example of the foot in the door technique. In this technique, the person looking to gain compliance starts with a small request. Once the other person has agreed to the smaller request, the person looking to gain compliance then moves on to the larger request of interest. In the example here, though you wanted to borrow $40, you started with a smaller request, $10, in order to make your friend more likely to agree with your larger request of interest, which was really $40. This can be effective because the gradual increase in the size of the request helps to make the larger request seem smaller or at least more acceptable. Being asked for $40 out of the blue seems like a much larger request than being asked for $10, then being asked for $40 instead. Foot in the door also works because we feel pressured to behave consistently. In the example here, our friend might feel like a bad or inconsistent friend if they agree to give 10, but not 40. They may feel pressured to remain consistent and agree with both requests. The door in the face technique is, let's look at the same scenario or a similar scenario. Imagine again that you want to borrow $40 from your friend. Another approach you might take would be first asking your friend if you can borrow $100. Then when they say no, you could ask for $40 instead. This is an example of the door in the face technique. In this technique, the person looking to gain compliance starts with a large request they know is likely to be refused. Once the other person has denied this large request, the person looking to gain compliance retreats to their smaller request of interest. So in the example here, though you wanted to borrow $40, you started with a large request of $100 in order to make your friend more likely to agree with your smaller request of interest, which was really the $40. When you asked for $100, you know your friend was likely to say no, and asking for $100 was simply a tool to eventually get you what you wanted. Psychologists believe one reason the door in the face technique works is because it tricks our brain into believing the other person has done us a favor by reducing what they are asking for. In the example here, your friend realizes that you are desperate for gas money and thus feels you have made a kind gesture by reducing the amount you're asking for in spite of your desperation. Your friend will then feel obligated to do something kind for you, like lending you the other amount of money. The lowball technique. To make use of this technique, after someone gains agreement or commitment from the target, they reveal hidden additional costs associated with that commitment. You might see a low-cost flight to Hawaii advertised on television. After deciding you should reward yourself for all your hard work in school and at your job, you go online to book the flight. You picture yourself laying out on the beach, relaxing with a tropical drink in your hand. As you go through the checkout process, you realize that the price you saw advertised was only for a one-way flight. You also realize that you will have to pay a fee for your bags and that the advertised price is only available on limited dates. All of a sudden, the price of your trip has increased drastically. Recognizing the increase in price of your trip, you could change your mind and decide not to travel to Hawaii, but research on the lowball technique says you are unlikely to back out now. Why? Though initially the reason for your trip may have been the great low price, as you started to think about the trip, you came up with other reasons to justify going. You work hard at school and at your job, you deserve a break, and you want to be laying out on that tropical beach. Those reasons remain even when the cheap price of the trip is gone, which makes you still likely to buy the even now more expensive tickets. That's not all technique. You have very likely seen this on television commercials. Using the that's not all technique, the person looking to gain compliance makes a request. But before the other person can say yes or no, the person looking to gain compliance sweetens the deal by offering a discounted price or bonus item. Often, when this technique is used in television advertisements, you will hear it prefaced with the words, "But wait, that's not all." For example, in commercials, you might hear the announcer exclaim, "But wait, that's not all. If you call right now, we will reduce the price from 4 payments of $19.99 to just 2 payments of $19.99. Or, "But wait, that's not all. If you call right now, we'll toss in a free snow brush and a book light with your order." Here is a video that I will link below showing a great example of the that's not all technique. Why does having a retailer add a bonus item or discounted price make us more likely to comply and buy the product they're selling? On one hand, the bonus item means we're getting more for our money. Now we're getting a snow brush and a book light and the product we were going to buy. On the other hand, the bonus item is often small or cheap, and it doesn't make the deal we're receiving that much better. Instead, this technique works because it preys upon part of our basic human nature. We are built, hardwired to notice when someone has done something kind for us and to repay that good deed. So, on some level, our brain is tricked by the bonus item or discounted price to believe that the spokesperson has done something kind for us, meaning we should do something kind in return for them. The only thing we can do for them is to give in and buy the product. Techniques based on scarcity. Compliance techniques do not usually work using the logical or rational parts of our minds. They seem to work using mental shortcuts or more primitive parts of our biology. The technique based on scarcity is not an exception to this. These techniques rely on our mental shortcuts or idea that what's rare is good. In our history as humans, this idea has been true at times. In societies where food is scarce, nourishment takes more effort to obtain, so it has more value. However, companies today realize we have this mental shortcut and they use it to their advantage. By leading consumers to believe that there is only a limited number of a certain product, or that a product or price will only be available for a certain time, businesses use our natural reaction to scarcity to their benefit. You may have seen many companies use scarcity techniques around the holidays. For example, toy manufacturers can strategically increase the demand for their product, while making sure supplies of the product are relatively low. Ensure that a popular toy is scarce or a limited supply makes people willing to pay more and exert more effort to get it. Remember, this works because we have this shortcut in our brain arguing that what rare is good and valuable. One example would be the hottest toy of the 1996 holiday season, causing shoppers to turn vicious, inspiring a whole new kind of black market. This $35 doll sold at several $1,000 markups, and it sparked a crazy scandal. This was the Tickle Me Elmo. So during this reign, Tyco, which was the toy company behind it, saw its sales change from 70 million to 350 million, all because of this toy. Tyco knew that Sesame Street was the most watched kids program at the time, and among its highly recognizable casts and silly characters, Elmo was the favorite. So the toy company settled on Elmo for the centerpiece for its holiday campaign. So before people lost interest in talk shows, basically a popular talk show by Rosie O'Donnell outfitted her staff with all of these dolls to use in promotions. They developed a secret word contest so audience members could win them, and Tycho gave the toys to other popular outlets like national morning news programs and other talk shows. So they kind of got advertising for free. And people tend to trust famous faces they see on television, in movies, and around town. So, what about obedience? How do we define this? Well, compliance involves a change in behavior as the result of a request from a person or group. With compliance, the person or group making the request does not have any real power or authority over us. This helps to tell the difference between compliance and obedience. Obedience involves a change in behavior as the result of a direct order from an authority figure. Authority and power can depend upon the situation or the circumstance. For example, your instructor probably doesn't have much power over you if you were to run into them in the grocery store, but in the classroom or in a discussion board, they have the ability to grade your work one way or the other. So Stanley Milgram's study on obedience, which we've talked about in a previous section, just reviewing it here, he worked on this. He wanted to know, why do people obey? So he was one of the social psychologists to do research into obedience and to see the limits to which people might go to follow orders. And in his study, he developed a study where people were going to shock other people, not actually shock them, but they thought they would be shocking them. And when he explained his study to psychiatrists, they said only 1 in 1,000 people would be willing to administer higher and higher shocks. Remember, no one actually got shocked. But in this experiment, people wouldn't know that they weren't shocking someone. They would think it was real. Milgram's studies found that 2/3, 65% of the participants were willing to work all the way through the switches. Crazy, right? 65% is so many. That's much more than 1 out of 1,000. Now, this is not to say Milgram's participants were all sadists. It's important to note that many of the teachers in the study showed signs of distress. Milgram's participants did not enjoy inflicting pain on the other person. Instead, what it revealed is just how powerful the drive to obey authority is. People were willing to follow the commands of an authority figure to the point that they would actually cause someone else pain. Now, as a side note, remember, they didn't actually cause pain, but they thought they were. So, even when they thought they were causing someone pain and they really should stop, when the authority figure said keep going, they did. Here are some practice questions. Nick wants Joelle to donate money to his charity. In order to get her to comply with this larger request, Nick first asks her for a smaller request, signing a petition. Nick is making use of which technique? The foot in the door technique. Which of the following is true regarding Milgram's study where participants were instructed by an experimenter to shock a learner every time they got a question wrong? Only the most mentally unstable participants were willing to do it. Participants seemed to enjoy doing it. It revealed that obedience was very powerful, or only the most gullible of participants were willing to administer the shocks. It revealed that obedience is extremely powerful. Even when the participants were uncomfortable, they continued to obey the authority figure. Jessica styles her hair the same way as many of the more popular girls in her high school. She hopes that copying their behavior will help to gain their liking and acceptance. This example shows the importance of which type of influence? Normative influence. That concludes this section of this lecture on social psychology. Please check for part 2.